Hi there. Welcome to this session of our Breakout sessions. I'm Dana Rogalski. I'm going to be your host. This Breakout session is titled Coming Alongside How to Do Short-Term Missions with Long-Term Impact. Before I introduce our presenter, I want to make you aware that this will be live streamed on YouTube, so your image may appear. And if you want to see any of the other sessions, maybe you missed one, maybe they were conflicting, you can always catch them up on our YouTube channel. Out of respect for our presenter, would you mind putting your phone on silent, please? And now I want to introduce Les Peters of Impact Ministries. For 25 years, Les and his wife have been serving as missionaries in the Central Highlands of Guatemala. They are the founders and field directors of Impact Ministries Canada, and they have hosted and led over 300 short-term missions teams. With the goal of reaching people for Jesus, Les and Rita have opened 11 schools, a medical clinic, 3 churches, and an orphanage. Not really a lightweight, are you, Les? They love what the Lord does when hearts connect cross-culturally to nurture the growth of God's kingdom. Please give Les a warm Mission Fest Manitoba welcome.
Thank you so much. What a pleasure to be here. And I love short-term missions because I was impacted on my first short-term missions trip in a way that was completely unexpected. And I have about 2 hours of material that I'm going to try and condense into 30 minutes. And I'm going to just kind of race through. Hopefully there will be a time for questions and answers at the end. How many here have been on a short-term missions trip? Okay, I wish we had time to ask you where you've all been. How many are considering leading a short-term missions trip in the future sometime? Okay, because that really is what this session is about, how to lead a short-term missions trip. We've actually done 500. There was a typo in there. In our last 35 years, we have been involved in about 500 short-term missions trips, and a lot of what we learned by making mistakes. And so in this session, I would like to give you a few pointers if I can, and there will be an outline available online afterwards. And if you want a set of notes, you don't need to take notes here today if you don't want to. I have cards over here where you can find the notes page later and some of the diagrams that I've got listed there as well. And so you can just kind of focus in on what's going on here. And I'm going to try and rattle through this as quickly as I can. Now, I grew up in small-town Saskatchewan, and so the idea of a short-term missions trip back in the day when I was young was a little bit off the charts. And to be really honest with you, for many years I was a short-term missions skeptic. Okay, I kind of got a distaste for people who had gone someplace, came back all excited, and were excited about what the Lord was doing over there. And I wanted them to be excited about what the Lord is doing here. And sometimes they went away fairly neutral, and when they came back, they were just gung-ho about this country or this mission or that other mission. And so I was a short-term mission skeptic, and I got pulled into my first short-term missions trip. I was principal of Kamloops Christian School, vice principal. I became principal later on. And the principal asked me to lead a short-term missions trip to Guatemala. Now, this is back in the day, before Google. And so I had to actually go to one of these things that was called an atlas and look to see exactly where Guatemala was. I knew it was someplace in Central America, but wasn't exactly sure. They had just come through 36 years of civil war. They were in the Civil War was still going on. And I wasn't sure I thought this was a good idea. And honestly, my expectation going into that short-term missions trip, because I was doing this for the very first time, and I didn't have internet connection with the people who were going to pick us up, or cell phones were non-existent at that time, and I just thought, my goal is to get every one of these young people home alive. That's my goal. Okay, and if they all come back alive and we're all good, okay, that was a good missions trip. The Lord did so much more than I could have ever imagined on that first trip. He changed the lives of our students. I saw them grow more in those 10 days than in 2 years of sitting in my Bible class. Now, that might tell you what kind of teacher I am, okay? But I saw something happen in the hearts of my students that just astounded me. And then the other thing that happened is on the very last night while we were in Guatemala, it was a short-term missions trip to Guatemala, the very last night we were there, the Lord snuck up on me and He pulled a piece out of my heart that I thought I had dealt with and asked forgiveness of and handled and been counseled about and pushed down there. He pulled it to the surface one more time and I thought, oh no, not again. No, I don't want to deal with all, I already asked forgiveness, and He pulled it out, and He healed it. And because of that, my life changed. And I thought, if the Lord can do this in me when I wasn't even expecting it, and just out of the blue, He can transform my life. I want to give my life to having this happen in other people's lives. And so I moved from being a skeptic to being a believer. Now, there's a lot of criticisms of short-term missions trips, and one of the questions that I'm often asked is, wouldn't it be better for our church to just put money together and send money to you? It's a lot of money to spend. It's one of the common criticisms for 10 days, spending a lot of money, and is it really worth it? And if you are considering going on a short-term missions trip or leading a short-term missions team, you will be asked that question, or you will have thought of it someplace as well. And here's my answer. It all depends if you're thinking short-term or long-term. Okay, my wife and I have been living in Guatemala for 25 years, and you heard some of the things the Lord has invited us into participating in, and it's just miraculous. It's mind-blowing. But in regards to short-term missions teams, it's part of our mission statement, actually. And with short-term missions teams, it all depends if you're thinking short-term or long-term. On the short term, if every short-term mission team that came and they spent all the money they normally spend on airfare and their in-country expenses and souvenirs, there's a big item there too, if they gave all of that to our ministry, could we have built more schools, established more churches, done more outreach, won more souls for the kingdom? Yes, we could have, short-term. But short-term missions trips aren't just about those 10 days. If it's about those 10 days, you're talking about a holiday. That's how we view vacations and holidays. Short-term missions trips are a step in the process, just in my life, as it was in my life, where the Lord touched me in certain ways and opened me up to certain thoughts I would not have otherwise considered. And it can redirect lives. And in the long term, if you have a group of young people or adults who come on a short-term missions trip and their perspective of missions has changed, are they going to come back to Impact Ministries and serve with us? Probably not. But there's no such thing as a bad investment in the kingdom of God. And they may well have a totally different focus about world missions, and we hope they go back to their church with a different view of short-term missions than what they've had. Or if it's a young person, it may just be, and I could tell you stories, I'm so limited, half an hour here, I could tell you stories of young people who, while the Lord was speaking to them in Guatemala, a seed was planted, and now instead of being self-serving, one young lady, she was offered a job that was paying over 6 digits coming straight out of grade 12. And I saw it happen. The vice principal of the school was right beside me when this was happening, and he said, I know why she's on her knees. She's stepping away from that opportunity, and indeed that was exactly what was happening. She was stepping away from that opportunity that was financially just better than most grade 12 students can ever dream of. And she decided to study psychology and go and work in a ministry in Africa to help children who were abused. And it happened right there on her knees in that short-term missions team meeting. So long-term, it's short-term missions trips are worth it. Other criticisms are that it detracts people from long-term work. And in some cases, that's true. Some missionaries that are alone on the field, and all of a sudden we impose ourselves on them, we're actually taking them away from work. So leaders need to be sensitive to that. And it may be better to write them a big check. Find out from them. Now, I want to go very quickly through some of the goals of short-term missions trips, and hopefully I can get to telling you a few stories, because this is all on point form and you can get it later. Goals of the missions trip. I divide it into two different sections for the destination people. And I think the first goal for a short-term missions trip should be to support the nationals, the local Christians, and be an encouragement to them and help them get on the program with them, with what they are doing. And it can be going on a short-term missions trip can be a huge confirmation of God's love for a particular person or a particular people group. I remember going into one home visit we did. We took our whole short-term missions trip down this path and into this little shack, and there was dirt floor, and they were living in poverty, no running water, and one light bulb in the center of the room. And we said, we just came to pray with you. And so we wanted to hear the story, and we listened to them. And that gentleman, an illiterate man who had given his life to the Lord and was doing the best that he could to raise his children, when it was all over, he came up to my wife and I, and he said, "Now I know the Lord hasn't forgotten me. These people came all the way from North America to our country, our little country. And not only that, they came to our little town. And now they're in my little house. And they came to tell me that Jesus sent them, to tell me that Jesus remembered me." And it was a marking point for him. So a confirmation of God's love and a proclamation of the gospel and a taste of Jesus as team members bring the message of Jesus. There is a reason Jesus said to go. There is a reason Jesus said to go. That was his last directive. And I can't get off track here. I'm on page 1 of 20 pages, so I can't get off track. But Jesus did say to go, and there's a reason he said to go. When we bring a short-term missions team into our part of the country, we have gone into communities, and when we arrange this all beforehand, and you're working with our local churches and our local Guatemalans who are trying to do outreach in that community. Now, can you speak Pocumchi or Quechua? No. And will you understand their culture? No. But when we told them we had a group of North Americans coming, the whole village showed up. This was a big deal. And we shared the gospel openly, and people came forward for prayer, and our team was able to follow up. And as we left, the leaders of this community said, "We have never had North Americans in our community before." So what were you? You were the attraction. You pulled the people together. If we would have announced 3 men from Taktik are going into this village, they would have said, okay. But we said, a team of North Americans are come. And so they sang Amazing Grace, and we could hardly understand it because the Spanish was so bad. But they sang it, and they were trying, and the people didn't speak Spanish anyways. They spoke Pocumchi. So they're listening, and they're laughing, and then they sang a verse in English, and that was even funnier. And then our team started sharing the message of Jesus, and our Guatemalan nationals picked up. The team was the crowd draw. And they picked up on it, and lots of good things carrying on in that community to this day. Okay, so this is for the destination country. Now, for the North Americans, it's an opportunity for an awakening like I had and like my students had. Seeing the miraculous hand of the Lord at work in a ripe harvest. The harvest in Guatemala at this point in time is very ripe. And in many parts, if you've been walking around the displays and having your ears open, God is doing some amazing things in other parts of the world. And sometimes those of us who have grown, I was born in the prairies here, and so those of us who have grown up in kind of isolated communities and have been in Canada all of our lives, we think the rest of the world is like we are. There's nothing further from the truth. And there are places that are ripe with the gospel. So when a cherry tree is ripe, in Bible school, my friend, his father owned a cherry farm. And I said, well, how many acres do you have? That many acres? How many people do you hire to pick? Well, we don't hire anybody to pick. We have a machine that goes and it spreads this tarp on the ground. And this was news for me growing up in Saskatoon. Spreads this tarp on the ground and then we shake the tree and all the ripe cherries fall. Guatemala, you shake the tree, people come to the Lord. So this was an eye-opener for me and my team. So the very first time into the country, I thought, this is crazy what they're asking us to do. They gave us little pamphlets, and they said, you go over there, you go over there, you go over there, at different parts of the park. What you do is you hold this up, and you shout the words, La Palabra de Dios. Shout it loud, La Palabra de Dios, the Word of God. I thought, oh my goodness, if I did that in Riverside Park in Kamloops, they'd call the police. So we put up our hands, shout, La Palabra de Dios, and people come. Okay, something different is going on, and that gets the wheels going in the North American who is there, an awakening of what God is doing in other parts of the world. And it develops a long-term commitment or a call or an involvement into missions that is really wonderful. And as I mentioned, our mission statement does say that part of our mission statement, a good mission statement is only supposed to say one thing, but ours says two things, and it's we want to teach biblical principles to Guatemalans, but we also want to affect North Americans for world missions. And so there is a hunger in young people who they want the bar raised, and people actually step to a challenge. And it's time we give them that challenge, and that challenge is global. Okay, how do we choose a short-term mission or a mission organization to work with? Now, I'm going to read through this very quickly because half my time is gone, and I'm only done a page and a half of my notes. Okay, first of all, what are their spiritual core commitments? Find out. This is important. Are they a humanitarian organization, or are they truly a gospel-driven organization? Now, those of us who are exposed to poverty for the very first time, we get it confused. We see poverty and we want to do something about the poverty. All right? There's thousands of humanitarian organizations that are out there doing something about the poverty or the lack of access to education or the lack of access to health care. Like, there are thousands of organizations. When I turned 40, I was asking the Lord, I said, actually the Lord asked me, if you have as much fruit in the second half of your life as you did in the first half, are you going to die a happy man at 80-some? Okay, I'm almost there. I'm 70 now. Oh my goodness. Okay, I said, no, I want to see more fruit in the second half of my life. Okay, well, that requires some change and some risk-taking. And so I said, Lord, I want to do what you want me to do. I'm not going to just go and start schools for the sake of starting schools. And I'm getting my notes all mixed up here, but I'll just interject this. You get this one for free, okay? We had a gentleman come down on a short-term missions trip, and he was involved in quality control in some factory. I don't know what it was. And he said, when you see a problem over here, you have to say, okay, why is this problem here? And then you go over here, you'll get an answer. That answer will come pretty quick. And then you say, okay, and why is this the way it is? And with a little bit more probing, you'll get to the reason for the basis of that. And he says, in quality control in any industry in the country, they say you have to ask the question 7 times before you get to the root cause of the problem. And I'm addressing working with humanitarian organizations here because humanitarian organizations look at this, they see the answer here, and this is where they're working. We are operating, the Lord spoke to me, if you have 40 years left, make it count in the right way. Get to the root cause. What's the root cause? The root cause is Genesis 3. That's where every problem, every conflict, every brokenness, every wound, every disappointment, every hypocrisy, this is where the root is. And Jesus is the answer. And the Lord spoke to me very clearly, and I think those of you who are going on short-term missions trips, make the distinction between helping raise their standard of living, and if somebody wants to do that, fine. You're helping pagans become wealthier pagans. Okay, but we don't have time for that. The Lord is coming, and we need to get down to the root cause. And how do we do that? Present the love of Jesus. So find out what their core spiritual commitments are, and if they're a humanitarian organization or truly a gospel-centric organization. I had one gentleman from a foundation in the United States come down, and he says, I'm coming to visit you. And he gave me the time, and he got on the plane, he came, he arrived. And after he had spent some time, he said, well, I wanted to know, before our organization committed to work with you, if you were just Christian on the website, or if you were truly functioning, sharing the gospel at a realistic level at the bottom line. There's a pastor sitting in this room right now who came. They came kicking the tires. I'm glad they did. They came to check us out before they brought a short-term missions team. If you have the opportunity to do that, find out what's their history, track record. Find out what the track record of the organization is. How does the church or agency articulate its purpose, goals, or objectives? These are all in notes. You can look them up. How does the church, what type of ministries are they particularly committed? In our case, we're involved in evangelism, discipleship, and leadership training. And how do we do this? We do this through schools, serving food, medicine. These are the perceived needs, but we're reaching the people with the gospel. What kind of care do they provide both prior and post-team event? Okay, the short-term missions trip should not be a 10-day period and then it's over. Like, there needs to be some transition back into the local church where things are, where the lessons learned are being applied. How are finances handled? What relationship does your church as well? What relationship do they have with your church as well as the national church? And what can you discern from about the missionaries through their lifestyles or their unwritten rules? That's worth finding out. You're spending way too much money to take a chance. My next point would be if you're, please work with your local church and your local church missions committee and your pastors. Don't be an independent person who takes a short-term missions trip and gets a whole bunch of people from your community or your church excited about missions in a certain country under your banner. It'll bring more division and more confusion than anything else. It really needs to be under the umbrella of a local church, because think about what your goal is. Your goal is for those missions team members to come back and be reintegrated into the kingdom of God and His work with renewed energy and renewed focus. That happens inside of community, and it happens inside the structure of the church. So you might ask, who's going on a missions team? Well, there are some who pray, some who support. Come on, let's go. Don't have time to. There we are. Some pray, some support, some go. If you're leading a short-term missions team, you need to do it with a blessing of the church leadership. Otherwise, you might do more harm than good. Okay, spiritually preparing the teams. Now, if you're not in leadership, then I feel sorry for you. Just hold on for about 5 minutes as I get through this next section. Preparing short-term missions teams, there's a component of preparing them spiritually before, during, and after the trip. We have lots of resources. There are lots of resources out there. There's books that have been written on how to lead a short-term missions team with success in a way that counts and will optimize those experiences into long-term discipleship deepening. Is that a way of saying it? Like there's been all kinds of books written on it, and here I'm trying to do it in half an hour. Yeah, that's kind of silly. Adjust expectations of the team members. What will it be like? Don't go too easy on them. In our case, we ask that all team members go on a media fast. So that means they have to put their phones away, they have to put their music away. I could stop here and tell some stories. I've only got 7 minutes left. I won't. We've had some amazing experiences because they thought once they came down to Guatemala, they could sneak their phone in there and listen to music, and all kinds of pressures like, I have not fallen asleep without music for the last 8 years. I said, well, you know what? After you're awake for 2 nights, you will fall asleep. And during those 2 nights, you may just end up hearing the Holy Spirit in a way that you have never heard before. And I have yet to come across a person who says, I wish we had not done that media fast, but that's just us, okay? Adjust team members' expectations and be ready to be flexible. We had one team that showed up, and 16 pieces of their luggage didn't come. And we were working in Guatemala City, so this is where you have to adjust them, get them ready to be flexible. Anything can change. Thank you, 5 minutes. Anything can change. So we went to the airport every day to see if the luggage was there. The last day before we went into the country, they knew if they didn't get the luggage, they were going the rest of the trip with a few little bits of clothes that they had. And so I came back to the team and I said, I've got good news and bad news. What would you like first? And they said, we would like the good news first. And I said, well, the good news is everybody gets a change of underwear today. And they were all happy and cheering. And they said, well, what's the bad news? And I said, well, you change with you and you change with you. Okay, so lots of expectations, set expectations. Develop a giver's heart instead of being givers and takers. We are takers without even knowing that we're takers. I saw this one situation where this guy in this beautiful, beautiful, clean clothes for the day, he saw this child sitting, no pants on, filthy. This kid had a white shirt that used to be white. Filthy, just snot and everything. And I saw this guy. Now, this is in our earlier years, and this is where you learn by mistakes. He went and he picked the child up and he says, here, take a picture. And then, okay, how did the picture turn out? He's a taker. It's all about me and the wonderful things that I'm doing. Okay, lots. Now, I want to take you to this page, When Helping Hurts. Now, those of you who are in the back rows, we've only got 4 minutes left. I have this on a handout, and you can go to the website, come and get one of these cards, and you'll have access to this. If you're involved in short-term mission trips and you have not read When Helping Hurts, you need to. When Helping Hurts is one of the most anti-short-term mission trips that books that have hit the market in the last 30 years. But they're making a lot of valid points. So I sometimes do the most of my learning through people who are writing from another perspective than what I hold. So let me just take you very quickly through this. It describes poverty. And it defines poverty in basically 3 ways. And the thing that I like about When Helping Hurts, we were discovering all of these things, and finally these guys articulated it, and when I read it, I said, yes, that's it. They said it in ways that I couldn't say it. So read the book. So they define poverty in 3 ways. First of all, a broken relationship with God. We define poverty by wealth, or how much is in the bank, or what we own. No, that's not the true definition of poverty. We need, and I know I'm doing a big ask here. In 1 minute, I'm asking you to shift your view of poverty. Physical resource poverty is not the problem. That's not the problem. Otherwise, God would have sent His Son with money to put in our bank accounts. That's not what He did. The problem is spiritual. So our first goal in understanding poverty is that there's a broken relationship here. And then the second thing is there's a broken relationship, poverty of the soul, when we don't know who we are, what we've been created for, and what our purpose is. That's an internal poverty that leads to depression. And another level of poverty is brokenness of relationship between people. Just look around the conflicts that there are in churches. That's a great opportunity to experience God's grace in bringing healing. And then broken relationship with our environment. So this kind of defines poverty and helps a team member come when they're confronting poverty for the very first time to say, okay, I get it. I get what the baseline is. All right? Another thing that they do is response. How do we respond? And basically they determine there's 3 levels of response, and short-term missions teams often don't know what they're doing. And you can respond by relief. That's for a crisis. And relief, it's all on the sheet there, and you can get a copy on the website. Relief is something where there's a natural crisis, and they need fast relief, and it needs to be for a short period of time. Okay, it can't stay long. And then there's rehabilitation and development. And so our ministry that we are involved in is more on the rehabilitation and development side. We get involved in relief when there are hurricanes and things. Avoid the common mistakes and work with the nationals. Prepare for cultural adjustment. And my time is gone. Okay, you know what? I've got 1 minute. I'll do this with you yet. Okay, so when you go into another culture, there are some things that automatically happen. And if a team isn't expecting this, automatically they will experience frustration, they will experience confusion, they will experience tension and embarrassment. Those are things that just happen because you're stepping into a different culture. So what are the initial attitudes? If the initial attitudes are our normal initial attitudes that we have in North America, we come in with a little bit of suspicion, a little bit of fear, and a little bit of prejudice, and we don't even see it in ourselves. We think we are free of all these things. But then when we encounter this frustration, confusion, and come on, let's go. Come on, I got 30 seconds. Go. There we are. It'll automatically shift to criticizing, rationalizing, and withdrawal. And what does that turn to? There we are, alienation and isolation. That's not what you go on a short-term missions trip for. So you as a team leader, it's your job to create a sense of openness, acceptance, and trust so that when they encounter these things of frustration, confusion, tension, and embarrassment, that the team member can observe, listen, and inquire, and relationships can be built. 1:45. Okay, now, if you have questions, please come and talk to me. I'll be in booth. I have no idea what number I am. There's a lot of other things I don't have any idea about. But do come and pick up a card if you want some of the notes. The notes are much more clear than what I've been. And you'll have access to this, and you'll have access to our resources, and this little graph thing there. So you can have it all right here. Okay, bless you. Did I do it?
Thank you, Les. You did it. I feel like I should have had some music playing underneath to cue that was the end.
Okay.
Like at the Oscars. Thank you so much. I know that was a lot to get in. I liked everything you said.
Thank you.
As someone who has led short-term teams around the world and hosted teams in Egypt, I resonated with everything you said. So thank you so much for saying it. Our next session starts at 2 o'clock. If you've heard something or if you're wondering perhaps maybe to discern whether to go on a short-term missions trip, there is a prayer team available. I encourage you to take advantage of them. Yeah, that's it. Hope to see you back here at 2. Thanks for coming.
My pleasure. I'll just give this back.
Yeah.
This back. Yeah, okay. There we are.
Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3.
Louder than that. Oh, that's right.
It's good. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. It's testing, testing. Oh,
The feedback is only coming because you're here right now. But if you were on stage,
Yeah.
it would be good. Well, sounds good.
so.
Hello, thank you for joining us for this session. My name's Dana Rogalski. I'll be your host for this breakout session that's entitled 7 Attitudes of Effective Short-Termers. Before I introduce you to our speaker, I want to let you know that this will be live streamed on YouTube, so your image may show up there. And if you want to catch any of the other sessions, they will be on our YouTube channel. Out of respect for our speaker, I would like you to put your phone on silent if you wouldn't mind. So Grace Fox is our presenter, and she's been a career missionary for more than 30 years. She and her husband, Jean, currently co-direct International Messengers, a missionary sending agency with 300 staff in 25 countries. They've trained and led short-term ministry teams annually since 2008. Grace is also the award-winning author of 14 books, a popular Bible teacher at international women's events, and a member of the first 5 Bible study writing team, Proverbs 31 Ministries. And she also writes for the devotional that I read every morning, Mornings with Jesus. She lives full-time aboard a sailboat. That's all I really want to hear about, is the sailboat. Near Vancouver. Please give a warm Mission Fest, Manitoba. Welcome to Grace Fox.
Well, I am so pleased to be with you today. And yes, my husband and I are here with International Messengers. So booth N19, if you want to join us there later, and if you have questions to ask. So we established the Canadian office for International Messengers back in 2007, and we have career missionaries out there long-term, but we also lead short-term teams to partner with our long-term missionaries. And so I really appreciated what Les had to say, and I just agreed so wholeheartedly with everything that he said. It was bang on. So my husband and I have led probably 30 teams over the years to Romania, Slovakia, Poland, and Nepal. But we've also done ministry in other countries as well. So one thing that we've learned firsthand when we train teams, and one thing that we teach our teams is that the ministry is threefold. That's what we believe. And this goes hand in hand with what Les was saying. So when we take a team, we say, you are ministering to the nationals. We want to reflect Jesus to the nationals that we're going to be with. We want to be a blessing to the missionaries with whom we're partnering and our teammates. So this isn't just about having an adventure for ourselves, but we're really going into work. And so we're going to talk about the 7 attitudes that we go in with in order to be the most effective. Now, let's just see if we can get this thing to work. Oops. Yep. Humility. This is the first one here. So there's a dictionary definition of humility, and it begins with there's modesty and submissiveness, considering others more important than oneself. If you look at the opposite, it's self-seeking and even arrogant. That's how the dictionary defines the definition and then the opposite. But Jesus is the perfect example of someone who went on a missions trip with humility. Because when you think about it, he came from heaven to earth, and he was here for what? About 33 years. And you think of Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 to 11. He did nothing out of selfish ambition. Everything he did was for the benefit of those whom he came to serve. He didn't look to his own interests, but to the interests of others. He didn't regard equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he poured himself out for the sake of those to whom he came. And we look to Jesus as our example in that. And so generally speaking, what does humility look like on a short-term trip? Okay, so it looks like setting aside our preferences and pouring ourselves out for the sake of our team members, for the sake of those to whom we're coming to serve, the missionaries and the nationals. So it looks like getting our hands dirty, doing something that we would really rather not do, but we're going to do it anyways because we're pouring ourselves out for the benefit of others. It might be something that we are asked to do that we just don't feel comfortable doing, but it's part of stretching and growing as a part of that ministry. It looks like dying to self, So here are some specific examples should you go on a short-term trip. So this is taken from experience, things that I've seen, things that I've learned and walked through all these 30 times of doing this. One is, say you're traveling in a shuttle van. So you get picked up at the airport and you're going to your destination place or driving in between. There are only a certain number of front seats in that van, correct? So when that door opens, are you going to be the first one in that front seat, or are you going to be willing to climb into the back seat? It's sometimes hard to do that, and sometimes there's so much luggage that it's even at your feet. But which seat are you going to go for? The one that's most comfortable, or are you going to be willing to get in the back and just say, no problem? So that's just one thought. That's humility, offering to ride in the back seat. Another one is, you probably have to share a room with the roommate. If you're not going with your spouse, you may be sharing a room, and it may be with more than one person. So when you get into that room upon arrival, are you going to look around for the most comfortable bed, the easiest one to get out of? Or are you going to consider the teammates and what their needs might be and their preferences, their physical abilities? Say you have somebody older on the team and it's a little hard for them to get in and out of spaces. Are you going to give preferential treatment to somebody on your team? Or are you going to look out for yourself? That's what humility is all about when you're going on a short-term team. Other ones, just pitching in and helping team members carry their luggage. Also cleaning up dirty dishes after a meal. Volunteering to do the least desirable task when there's several tasks that must be done. Which one are you going to go, I'll do that? I led a women's team to Romania several years ago. So we showed up, it's November, it was pouring rain and it was cold outside, but one of the jobs that they asked the team to do, this is one of them, was rake up a soccer field of all the loose leaves. And it's pouring rain and it's freezing outside. The other jobs were working inside a brand new church facility. It was going to open that weekend. We were going to have the first service there, but they still needed to sweep up all the stuff that's left behind from construction and that, clean the windows off. And so who's going to volunteer for raking the leaves? So that's the type of thing that I've seen happen over and over again. Humility means we are not considering ourselves as spiritual Rambos coming in to save every soul that we come in contact with. That is not our purpose. We need to go in, understanding that God is inviting us to participate with Him in His kingdom building work. And so we're going in to be sensitive and to reflect Christ to others. And follow His lead, but it's not our doing when other people come to faith. It's His Holy Spirit drawing them to Himself, and we get a piece of it. Okay. Second quality is teachability. Did it work? Yep, it worked. Yeah. So no matter what we do in life, we never stop learning. Every day, we should be learning something new. So even the disciples said, "Lord, teach us to pray." And that was demonstrating an attitude of teachability with Jesus Himself. So if we want to be effective as short-termers, we need to demonstrate the same mentality. So what is that going to look like on the field? So I'll give you some specific examples, okay? One is sharing your testimony. So in our culture here, we might think, I know how to share my testimony. I've got this. And so we go into a culture and we get up to stand up to share our testimony, and unless we've really learned this, we may be using words that don't translate. So we've worked in countries where, what we say here is, I asked Jesus into my heart. How many of you have heard that phrase here? That doesn't translate in some countries. And so people will stand up and they start giving their testimony. We've gone through this in training. We've practiced sharing our testimony in training, and we've said, don't use that term. But you know what? You get up and you're a little bit nervous or whatever, and you just fall into the same Christianese that we've grown up with here. And we forget that term doesn't mean anything. So that translator is thinking fast on his feet to turn that into a term that means something to the people that we've come to serve. And so be teachable. If you go through training ahead of time, and hopefully you do, be teachable. And don't go in with that attitude of, I've got this nailed, I've done this before, I can do this. Do it in a way that's culturally relevant. planning crafts, even something so simple as that. We host family camps and youth camps, and crafts are a part of the afternoon program. And so I remember one gal on our team came in and she said, I've got a craft. And she wanted to make, these garden stones, patio stones made out of concrete. And that's what she wanted to do. She thought the missionaries on the other side could buy all that concrete powder, we could mix it up, and they could go home with this lovely garden stepping stone. But the problem was, all of our people live in apartments and they don't have gardens. So that's going to be a craft that's going to be totally useless to the people on the other end. So why do it? And we explained that to her. She went, oh, yeah, okay. And she was able to just switch it up and come up with a craft ahead of time that people could actually enjoy later. So that's a teachable spirit. Here, I was in Poland one time for doing a women's conference. They had people sitting at their meals, probably 4 8-foot tables end to end. And I was, having a good time visiting with the ladies. And but you know how we might say here, could you please pass the salad? And people will pick it up and pass it down. But I'm noticing the ladies there were getting up from their chair. They'd walk 6 steps down or whatever, reach between 2 people, pick up the bowl and bring it back to their own plate and serve themselves. And I'm like, oh, well, that's just way different than home, But during the conversation, 2 of the missionaries, one was American, one was Polish, and they're sitting here at the end of the table with me. They finally leaned over and whispered to me and said, Grace, you got to stop asking people to pass you things. And I said, why? I'm thinking I'm being polite. And they said, because when you ask them to pass you whatever it is you want, that suggests to them that your desire for that salad is greater than your respect for the conversation they're having with their friends. I had no idea. I had no idea that I was offending them by asking. I thought I was being polite. And so be teachable. If somebody points something out, accept what they say. Let it roll off your back. Don't be offended. But just, if you have to apologize, apologize. But here's what happened, because I thought, okay, I got to make this right, but I don't know how to do this. And so I remember getting up. I think I said to some of the ladies beside me who I'd been asking to pass me the things, I went, oh, watch this. So I got up, walked down the table, reached down between, got my bowl and set it down in front of me, and they burst into applause. She got it. Okay, she's not so dumb after all, But be teachable on whatever it is. Let's see here. Understanding how the organization with which you're going does ministry. Because maybe you've gone with different organizations, but each one might have their way of doing things. So learn and follow their approach. Like, for instance, I'll give you an example on that one that just pops into head. We were in Poland, and we were doing like a worship service in the evening with our campers. And our missionary had said, like, when the person shares the testimony, just share the testimony and then sit down. And so, North American thinking or whatever, like the spiritual, I'm going to save everybody Rambo thing, this one woman we know got up and shared her testimony and then went into a full-blown sermon on, you got to receive Jesus or you're going to hell. And I'm like, I'm in the back just going, you got to be kidding. How do you end this? How do you stop this without making her look bad? But it was just a very awkward situation. And so it wasn't for us to go into that sermonizing. It was that missionary's role. That's the way that would have been more appropriate and more effective to do it. We have another time on that same team that I took the women's team in. We had gone over with our people ahead of time in training. Do not tell the missionaries how to do their job. They've been there for 25 years. They've got this. We don't need to come in as strangers and tell them what to do. And so we're working hard, manual labor, that first stage, just getting that church ready to go. And one woman from Canada was with me, and we were with the American missionary gal. So she started talking about, oh man, it's been so busy, and especially as they were getting all the stuff ready for the church to open and all. And this other gal stepped in and said, you should really take some time off with your husband. You should take a holiday. And the face on our staff member, her face just fell. Because do you not think she would be taking time off if she could? But she couldn't. She just could not take that time off. There was no one else to do what she was doing there at that point in time. And so it was like, we just need to learn when to be quiet. And this woman from Canada meant it as an encouragement. She meant it like, I hear what you're saying. I feel for you. But it didn't come across like that. And so we have to be so careful. So the third one is sensitivity. And part of the example I just gave you would be sensitivity on that. But, we might mean well, but, we got to be careful. Hosting a team takes a lot of time and energy. And so we have to express appreciation for that and really understand that it's cost them family time, it's cost them whatever, but they're willing to work with us, and so be grateful and to be content with what they provide. And so if they put you up in a place where, mattresses are kind of hard and the pillows are kind of lumpy, we don't go to them and say, I need a better pillow than this. This really isn't doing it for me. Or, can't you get me a mattress topper because this one is really hard? Like, no. Just be content and know that you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you for at least 5 nights. You can do it. But just bless them, respect their time, and respect their space. So if you go into their home, watch for the cues. Do they take their shoes off at the door? All those kinds of cues. Just follow their lead. Do they want help in the kitchen? Here's the thing. I've been in so many missionaries' homes where my first bent is to say, can I help you in the kitchen? Can I give you a hand? And there's one gal in particular who's like, no, I've got this. And I'm thinking, you are so overworked. Just let me give you a hand. But then I realized the reason she was saying no was not because she didn't want the help. It's because her kitchen was so small. And when I say that if you had, if I stood back to back with her, we were touching, that is no exaggeration. That's the width of her kitchen. And so it was easier for her to do it alone rather than having to move with another body in that tiny, tiny space. And so follow the cues and be sensitive to whatever it is they're saying. It might be that she knows better what to do for food preparation, like, what do you use boiled water for? What do you use tap water for? And we could go in there and do something wrong and get everybody sick. So we don't want to do that. Let's see. Oh, here's another one. Big one. When we're partnering, especially with national missionaries, there might be somebody whose monthly income is like $800 a month, okay? And they're paying rent out of that, and they may have 3 kids that they're trying to clothe. And I've been in those situations with national missionaries like that. And so they kindly take us on one day of sightseeing at the end of the trip. And our people inevitably want to buy souvenirs. And so I remember one time we went out for dinner at the end of the day, and the people that we were with, they were so excited about the souvenirs they had, they just go to pull it out. But here's our driver who we've hired, a national driver, and here's our national missionary, and our people are pulling out their souvenirs and showing everybody what they spent on jewelry and what they spent on whatever. And it's like, put it away, because you just spent more on souvenirs than that guy earns in a half a month. And that is not what we want to convey to them. That is not what we want to do. So that's just being sensitive to their needs and blessing them. Okay, sensitivity to the nationals as well. You know what often comes out of our mouth? When we go see something, we see it's different. Wow, that's weird. No, it's not weird. We're in their space now, and this is the way they do it. It's not weird, it's just different. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just different. So driving on the other side of the road, it's not driving on the wrong side of the road. They're just driving on the other side. So what I mean? So we just be sensitive to the things that we say, and especially with food, okay? Because we might be offered something that smells different or tastes different texture than what we're used to. And so we take that first bite, or we're hesitant because we're looking at it on the plate. We're hesitant about it, but they see the hesitancy. They might be giving us their best because they want to bless us, but they see that little hesitancy. Or here's the thing. You know what we do without even realizing it? We go, see what I mean? That's it. The little cock of the head and the little raise of the eyebrow. Or we look at our teammate with that like, and they see that. They can catch that, right? And so what they're giving us their best, and we've just smacked them with that. So it's like, hey, thank you. This is an adventure. I've never had this before. Thanks for giving me an adventure. It's okay to say that and just be grateful. Go with it. Sensitivity to our roommates. You know, people respond in different ways when they're functioning on jet lag. And especially if beds are not what we're used to and they're not sleeping well through the week. People might just be going through this culture shock all of a sudden, and withdrawal is one of the things. So if your teammate starts disappearing into the room and not wanting to come back out and they're not fully participating in the program, go to them and kindly say, is everything okay? What can I do for you? And be available to pray, because you're in a warfare going on, and Satan is not happy about that. So he is going to try to just cause problems in every way he possibly can. But if you unite as a team and pray for one another, that just really is helpful. Flexibility is the fourth one. And when I think about flexibility, I think about, there you go. We just say, it's like, make like a rubber band. If you don't stretch, you're going to snap. And so when the shuttle driver or the missionary says, I need you downstairs at the foyer at a certain time, and you've gotten all your stuff ready, and you're down there, and then they don't show. And they don't show. And it's an hour into it. Nobody's there, and there's no explanation. It's this. We coined a phrase on one team. It's called the art of lingering. So when you're asked, you're supposed to be there on time. You get there on time. But nobody else, the ones in charge, aren't. It's okay. It's okay. There might be a specific reason. There might be a traffic pile up. The missionary may have had one kid just had a meltdown that morning, and so they're dealing with family things, and they can't get to the space where you're staying. And those types of things happen. And so be gracious, be flexible, practice the art of lingering. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's not the end of the world. Be flexible with that concept of time, because when we think we're on time, somebody else has a whole different concept of that and what that means. But it's okay. So be flexible with daily schedules. Be flexible with accommodation. I like what Les said earlier, in that kind of give up your expectations. We all go into these things with expectations, whether we realize it or not. So it's really hard to just give it up because you don't even know you have them. But it's like, God, just pray, God, help me, roll with it. Help me just be flexible no matter what happens, to not stress over it. Be flexible with work assignments. We had one team that was prepared to go in and do a young adult camp, and about 3 days before they left, they found out from the host nationals that young adults didn't sign up, so they opened it up to the neighborhood children, and now they're running a VBS. They're going to have 80 kids here. Whoa, 3 days to go. Okay, change of plan. And they did it. The team didn't balk. They didn't throw a fit. They just said, okay, let's do this. And it was phenomenal, the ministry. It was like what God intended in the first place. But the team rolled with it, and it worked. Okay, integrity. Integrity. That is being honest and strong moral principles. So just a couple of things in that regard is, if people ask questions of a spiritual nature and we don't know the answers, don't make it up. But just say, you know what, I don't know. But I will talk to somebody tonight and I will get back to you, and then get back to them. That's integrity. It's integrity when they say, because relationships will happen really fast on a short-term team like that. Will you email me when you go home? Can we stay in touch? You know what? You're in that kind of an emotional situation, and you want to say, yeah, sure, okay. And then you know what? You go back to life, and you get busy, and they email, and you don't respond, and then they're hurt. So you might say, I'll see what I can do. I can't make a promise. Or I hear this happens all the time. Relationships are so strong at the end of that week camp that they'll say, you coming back next year? You're coming back next year, right? So I can see you again. And our emotional response wants to say, you bet, I'll see you next year. But you don't know what the Lord has for you. And so to say, Lord willing, I'm not sure what he has for me, but if he wills, I will be back. That's integrity. And then there is never a reason to be alone with a member of the opposite sex at a ministry like that. Never, ever. So don't ever put yourself in a compromising situation. Okay, authenticity is another one. Authenticity, yeah. Take the mask right off. So it means we're willing to share stories from our life, because you guys, people where we go think, you're from North America, you are living in the next best thing to heaven. And if you live in the next best thing to heaven, that means you're rich and you have no problems. That's how we are seen for the most part in many of these places. And so what we need to do is go in and with discernment and with discretion share from our own life. But what God has done and hardships we've had and how he has proven faithful. I have one friend who lost her husband suddenly when they were on vacation in California, and he just died. And so she came with us many times to our Polish camps. But that first time after her husband had passed away, she got up to share her testimony, and she cried. She had these Valentine boxes of chocolates you can get, sort of 2 inches deep or whatever. She took one of those and cut it like this. And then she held it up, apart. And she talked about how her heart was broken with her husband of 40 years just dying so fast. And yet she talked about Jesus being her strength and her encouragement and her hope, and she put them together, and she said, he's healing my broken heart. It was so powerful. Then, she was kind of choking as she was getting through it, but people were crying, and I was crying, and, but it was so beautiful. But she was authentic, and that bonded her to other people, because they knew this one was from Washington, like she's from North America, so she's rich, and she has no problems. Oh, wait a minute. She's had a broken heart. She lost her husband, and that made them realize, what life is. There's pain no matter where you come from, but Jesus is the one who can heal that pain. It was just beautiful. I could tell you all kinds of stories about authenticity and how that has just brought walls down and given opportunity to minister. So authenticity builds trust, and that's what we want to do, and then forges relationships so that they can share their stories with us. Okay, and the last one. Maturity. Okay, we want to demonstrate maturity. So this is what this looks like. Maturity seeks to view other people through God's eyes. Because we might go in and we're looking at the nationals who are coming to the camp or whatever and thinking, boy, you are really messed up when you start hearing, you have a lot of baggage. And that would be our human bent. But to say, God, give me your eyes for these people. Help me see them through your eyes. And that develops compassion in us and an empathy that we can't work up on our own. That's maturity. Maturity thinks before it speaks. Is it true? Here's the think acronym. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspirational? Is it necessary? And is it kind? So we think before we speak. That's maturity. And we just know when it is right to speak up, when it's time to be silent with the nationals, with our missionaries, with our team. And then maturity seeks to be fully present in the moment. And I loved what Les had to say. They go on the media fast when they're gone. We've never asked our team members to do that, but we say, please, you're here for such a brief moment in time. God has called you to this, so you pour everything you've got into it. You can sleep on the plane on the way home. But for now, be fully present in the moment. Put the phone away. Don't be relaying faces of our people all over social media, because sometimes if they're found out to be at a Christian camp when they've defied the spiritual authorities in their life, they're going to be in trouble. They could be in trouble with their work. And this isn't just Middle East. This is Eastern Europe as well. So don't put their faces on there. And it's not a project. Don't put yourself with that little baby like he was talking about and, look the good things I'm doing. But it's just put the phone away and be fully present in the moment. Put communication with your family away. Unless there's an emergency that comes up, whatever, we can figure that out. But maturity fully engages with the people and the task at hand, knowing that this time is short. So we're going to pour everything we've got into it, okay? So that's what I've got. I was just thinking of how none of us get it right all the time. None of us. We're all works in progress, and we're going to say things, we're going to do things that will go, oh, what was I thinking? Later, maybe we won't even realize it. But God is such a good God, and the fact that he calls us his ambassadors blows me away, because I don't know that I would do that if I was him. Trust me with that role. That's a pretty hefty role. But he calls us his ambassadors, and he graciously uses us even when we do make blunders. But if we're aware of these things going in, the chance of making those damaging blunders are a lot less. So if you have questions, you want to come talk more, booth N19, International Messengers, Canada.
Thank you so much, Grace. Let's
bet.
have a round of applause. That was really good. Not only can she write, she can speak. I especially like that art of lingering.
Oh, I love that. Isn't that a great phrase?
It is. Do I have to use it with my sister?
Oh, go ahead. And what about flexibility? You think, okay, take a piece of wet noodle. Be a wet noodle. That's the other one we say on Flex Up. Be a wet noodle. Just be the wet noodle.
Go and visit Grace at the booth. So our next presentation is at 4:45, and if you want prayer for anything, maybe you're trying to discern something, we do have a prayer team available for you. Thank you so much for coming out to this session.